For historical context and more information, see the description below.
The pastoral epistles, which are composed of 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus, have long been a matter of dispute so far as their authorship is concerned. For many years, Paul was given full credit for them, but as Ernest Scott has pointed out, the style and the vocabulary are on the whole different from the style and the vocabulary of Paul. The theological teaching is different, and the epistles refer to an official ministry which was not in existence at the time of the apostle. And so it has been claimed that the writer was writing under a pseudonym, and he was writing as he thought Paul would have written. Be that as it may, there would appear also to be unanimous conclusion that some of the parts do belong to the apostle. The writer must have had some access to his papers, and this is particularly true of parts of 2 Timothy, especially that 7th verse of the 4th chapter. I have fought a good fight, I have finished my course, I have kept the faith. It's one man's testimony to his loyalty to his Lord. He counted as loss all things that were not going to be gained for his master. It is not an easy victory I have won, he was saying in effect, but I have seen the matter through to the end, and over all kinds of obstacles, against all opposition, I have finished the course. Well has it been pointed out that it is a praiseworthy matter to stand up and be counted, but it's a much more difficult achievement to remain standing after you have been counted. Paul did that, and because of it, he was able to say, I have kept the faith, I've been loyal to the best I knew. It's a great quality, this quality of loyalty. In Maxwell Anderson's The Eve of St. Mark, Private West was faced with the alternative of retreating or standing his ground in the Philippines. In the play, he's having an imaginary conversation with his girlfriend back home, and she, Janet, asks, "Who asks this of you?" They shouldn't ask it. And the soldier replied, "Nobody asks it. It's something in myself that I don't understand, that seems to require it of me. It seems to be the best of me. That same inner self that turned to love you and to love no one else. That thing within myself that insisted that I give more than is asked of me." Well, it's a great quality. Loyalty. And surely it's a much needed consideration for our time. Webster's dictionary says that it means unswerving allegiance. Josiah Royce says that it's the greatest of all the virtues. Some of us would argue with him there. What about the virtue of gratitude, for instance? But there's no doubt about its importance. What a significant place, for instance, that it plays in the family. Many divorces take place because the husband and the wife have forgotten promises, because there has not been loyalty to the original expressions of love. What a significant place it has in business. in the relationship of the employee and the employer. What a significant part it plays in the whole fabric of our society. Senate investigations, federal juries' investigations cropping up with alarming frequency, and often pointing to a lack of loyalty to the great principles in life. It is often said that the great problem of our present day is a lack of morality. Really, all that's saying is that we in this day are lacking a loyalty to the great principles of life, and that's the sum of it. A Japanese writer in Tokyo magazine has divided Americans into the oblique and the straight Americans. The straight Americans are those who emphasize the great values, while the oblique Americans are those who are prone to compromise. Well, I imagine that could be said of any nation, but it's our immediate concern to ask just what are the percentages of oblique and straight Americans as we're concerned with them. Surely now that elections are over, we would better get down to business and take a very serious look at the whole business, at a rededication to the high things of life to which we should be loyal. America needs renewal of such things, not only in government, but from their very grassroots. And in the doing of it, in the recognition of it, we would do well to remember the words of the wife of Wendell Phillips when he was going out to meet the mob. She said to him, "Now, Wendell, don't you shilly-shally. Now, America, don't you shilly-shally." In the first place, we need to see clearly in our minds what are the things that are the grand essentials demanding our loyalty. One cannot play the game, you see, unless he can see the goalposts. When Joshua had the responsibility of leading his people, he saw that they were not being loyal to what they'd been taught. And so he called them together and he reminded them of the great things from which they had come, and he reminded them of what the God had done for them. And so he called upon them to forget the lesser values and to take a long, hard look at the larger ones. In the election period, we were reminded that the nation, the things that we stand for in this nation, please God, we voted with them in mind. But now that we've stood up and been counted, we've still got the very serious business of continuing to stand after we have been counted, of continuing to fight the fight, to keep the faith, of being loyal to high principles, of recognizing that this whole business of law and order and justice, that this is a continuing battle, that the rights of other men, regardless of race, color, or creed, that this is a continuing battle, that this matter of reminding people that we're not only living in a nation where we have rights, but where we have great obligations, that this is a continuing battle. And that we should say prayerfully to ourselves day after day the words of Washington Gladden, "I know that right is right, that it is not good to lie, that love is better than hate, and a neighbor than a spy. And in the darkest night of the year, when the stars have all gone out, that courage is better than fear, and faith is truer than doubt. And fierce though the fiends may fight, and long though the angels hide, I know that truth and right have the universe on their side. Such things form the goalposts. A part of that faith that keeps demanding a continuing loyalty. And as we see all this related to our country, to keep it in perspective, and to keep remembering that there is a God above the state. And if we ever come to that place where we place the state above God, we are not Christians anymore, we've become atheists. And the state must never claim that loyalty. The loyalty that says this nation under God. And of course, it's essential, I think, that we should take stock, too, of the people for whom we voted and the ones who were elected, and to stand behind them. Last spring, we preached a series of sermons on men of minor mention in the Bible. It's rather difficult when one looks through the Old Testament and the New and sees the great multitude of people there who are almost nameless, and to say, this is the group that is chosen upon whom I'm going to preach. We might very well have preached one on Barzillai, who was a great friend of David. When David was having his trouble with others, with Absalom, and all those who were seeking his life, it was Barzillai that stood by him. And when David fled for his life, it was this man who got food to him while he was in hiding. Loyalty to those for whom we voted. Continuing loyalty to those to whom we've committed our efforts. Pretty important business in a democracy. So many people who are elected would thank God if we didn't let our loyalty simmer down after the elections are over. If we would follow our ballots with support in those things that we want our representatives to do. Believe me, they have problems. They have tremendous problems. For instance, they have to work against the pressure groups. The group that's always seeking its own special advantage. The lobbyist that can only see his own interests. And he'll exert all kinds of pressure just to meet that end. One senator changed his position. And one of the opposition went to him and said that he was very happy that this man had seen the light. His answer was, I didn't see the light, I felt the heat. Now, this is what our elected representatives are up against constantly. They're up against the heat. Lobbyists, pressure groups, they have done a lot of good in the government of our nation, but they have also done a lot of harm. And the weaker people have fallen before them unless they've been able to get the support from back home that will carry them through. All of us have that responsibility, and it's an individual responsibility. It's said that Carlyle once pleaded with a certain member of Parliament named Richard Mills, trying to get a pension for Alfred Lord Tennyson. Interesting, isn't it, that way back in those days, they were working on something of the same problems as we're facing. But he wanted this pension for Alfred Lord Tennyson. Mills said, Carlyle, I could not get him that pension because my constituency would not stand for it. Carlyle came back with the words, Richard Mills, when you stand before the judgment seat, it's not your constituency, but it is you, Richard Mills, that will be damned. This is individual business, you see. All of us, the individual responsibility of determining our thinking of where in the world we're going to put our weight and to make sure that that weight is put in the place that prayerfully has been determined before God. It's an individual business, even with our own problems, of course, and the enemy always comes up so slowly and with such subtlety. Often the surrender of loyalty doesn't look like that at the beginning at all. Just a little thing that we did. Didn't seem to matter much at the time, just a little concession, just a little surrender. The businessman who loses his position because he has stolen from a company. The person who gets into any kind of serious trouble in this world, usually it started as such a little thing. The cancer that eats into loyalty usually begins as such a tiny cell. It starts as a footpath, and then it keeps getting wider and wider until it becomes a 4-lane highway, and we've a full-blown battle in our hands. Isn't it true? Every day, every hour is such a matter of fighting a fight, of keeping a faith. And if you let your guard down for a moment, the dire results that can come. And it may cost dearly. For instance, it cost Jesus Christ mockery, scourging, a cross, a loss of life in his early 30s. Paul is fighting the good fight and finishing the course and keeping the faith that meant whipping and stoning and imprisonment and probable death. Savonarola, loyal to his principles. What did he get for it? Stoned while hanging on the gibbet. Expensive business. Loyal. And yet the other's pretty expensive too. For instance, if you go to West Point, you will see the shields of the famous American soldiers. One of them has no name on it, just the date of birth and the date of death. It's the shield of Benedict Arnold. And it's a name that will be paid from now to eternity. Horrible business. Disloyal. Do you remember the story of that Spitfire pilot in the Second War? He was tired of the whole business. And he decided that in this particular battle, he was going to get above the German planes. After having first of all set things in the cockpit so that he could easily get out. And he was going to fly through the German planes without taking any of them on in combat. And when he got through them, and attentions were turned in other directions, he would turn his plane over, drop out, and parachute to Earth. And he did it. And the French underground took him in tow. And they made a great fuss over him. But 2 days later, he shot himself. And he left a note saying that he just couldn't live with himself any longer. Pretty expensive business, this matter of disloyalty. And psychiatrists will tell you that people will come to them and something that they did that was smaller than any human being should have done away back there has come back to haunt them. And this is the cause of their sickness. You remember in the robe, Caso was talking with Marcellus, and he said, or about Marcellus rather, he said Marcellus was certainly an unusual fellow. He had every advantage, but he used to work alongside the laborers as if they were his own sort. And every evening he would tell them stories about Jesus. And Antony answered that it all made sense. Marcellus killed the man who had spent his life doing good things for needy people, and the only way he could square up for it was to spend his life that way. He couldn't help himself. He had to make things right with Jesus. Expensive business. Disloyalty, or shall we call it sin? We may think that we can indulge it and we're going to get away with it. How do we know? Because you see, disloyalty doesn't present its bill beforehand. So often it waits until the deed is done, and then there's nothing left but to pay and to pay. The wages of sin. I've fought the good fight. I've finished my course. I've kept the faith. Not a simple achievement. But being a Christian isn't simple business either. One great Scottish preacher put it, you will not stroll into Christ-likeness with your hands in your pockets, idly pushing the door open with careless shoulders. Paul advised his followers to put on the armor of God, having one's loins girt about with truth, and having on the breastplate of righteousness, and one's feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace, taking the shield of faith, the helmet of salvation, the sword of spirit, praying always. And he infers in Ephesians that being a loyal Christian demands the use of every weapon in the spiritual arsenal. It means a constant feeding of the soul, a reaching out for the revelation of God. I believe, too, that these are days when certain specific things stand out, demanding a special loyalty. I believe this is true of the Christian church, that these are days that demand a loyalty to the church. Now, at times this is difficult. At times the church does things with which we just don't agree. But so far as our own denomination is concerned, I know that its leaders are sincerely trying to find the role of a church in a dangerous, tension-filled era. Of course, they're going to make mistakes. They're going to go off in tangents. They're going to try this and they're going to try that, and some of them aren't going to work. And some of them we're going to decide are not of God. You see, the great thing about the church is that we expect it to be perfect. But it isn't, because it's made up of people like you and me. The church isn't perfect. We have this treasure in earthen vessels. And as with individuals, God often lets his church go through a great deal of trial and error before the way opens up. But that may be the most important time in the life of the church, because it's then that it's learning. Just as with children, and they're stumbling and they're falling and putting their hands against hot stoves and pulling them back, these are important times in the life of the child, because it's then that he's learning. I say, let's be loyal to the church while she's going to school. And who knows but what in the long pull we may discover that a lot of people were right that we thought were wrong. It's a dangerous day in which to claim infallibility. I believe, of course, that along with that goes loyalty to the Christ. You recall the conversation of Kent and King Lear? And the king asked, "Who wouldst thou serve?" And Kent answered, "You." And the king went a little further and asked, "Dost thou know me, fellow?" "No," said Kent, "but you have in your countenance that which I would fain call master." "And what's that?" asked the king, and the answer was authority. Christ was Paul's authority. He was the point of reference. He found, as so many others, that Christ was not only the truth, but he was the way to truth. In the power of his might, to the end of things, he was loyal to his master, and he kept the faith. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
This morning's worship service came from Shadyside Presbyterian Church in Pittsburgh.